Okay, let's unpack this. Today, we're diving deep into a really fascinating and actually unprecedented leadership change at the United States Naval Academy. You might think, okay, a new leader, so what? But honestly, when you hear the details, you'll see this is way more than just swapping personnel. It feels like a strategic signal wrapped up in some very deep tradition. And yeah, definitely spices with a bit of controversy.
Absolutely. What's really illuminating here, I think, is how this one appointment kind of shines a light on these broader shifts happening within our military and, how leadership itself is evolving to meet what's becoming an increasingly complex and well-contested world. We've got some good sources that'll help us understand not just the who and what, but really the why.
Yeah.
Why does this matter for the future of naval service and ultimately for you?
Right. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. Pull out the most important insights from the recent announcements, maybe touch on the history and the big responsibilities of the superintendent, and then connect all these changes to the wider picture. Military readiness, future leadership, all that. And I have to say, when I first saw this headline, it genuinely made me do a double take. For the first time in 180 years, the U.S. Naval Academy, Annapolis, it's going to be led by a Marine, that's right, Marine Lieutenant General Michael J. Borgschulte, nominated. It's just
wow,
a monumental shift.
It really is. And Borgschulte isn't just, any Marine picked out of a hat. He's actually a Naval Academy grad himself, class of 91. He even played linebacker for the football team back then, lettered in 1990, I believe.
Oh, really? A linebacker?
Yeah. And his career since then, well, it's packed with extensive combat experience. He was a helicopter pilot, flew AH-1 Cobra attack helicopters. His call sign, get this, was MEAT.
MEAT?
Right, over 3,800 flight hours total, and a remarkable 700 of those were in combat, Iraq and Afghanistan. He commanded Marine Light Attack Helicopter Squadron 367 during the Battle of Marja back in 2010, led the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing later on. Right now, he's the Deputy Commandant for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. So, a very seasoned leader.
MEAT. You can definitely feel the combat readiness just in that call sign alone. But beyond his, clearly impressive resume, what's the actual significance here? A Marine, not a Navy officer, taking the top job at the Navy's premier academy.
Yeah.
What's the signal?
Well, this is where it gets really insightful, I think. Because historically, exclusively the Academy has been led by Navy officers.
Yeah.
Always. So, Borgschulte's appointment is a really profound break from that tradition. Secretary of the Navy John C. Phelan actually described the nomination as a powerful signal of naval integration.
Naval integration, okay.
Yeah, and that's not just like a buzzword for joint operations. It feels more like a strategic bet, a bet that future naval power really depends on much deeper connection, much closer collaboration between the Navy and the Marine Corps. It could really shift how every graduate, Navy or Marine, is expected to operate, in multi-domain warfare scenarios.
That is a powerful statement, and it makes a certain kind of sense when you remember, like you said, about a quarter of Annapolis grads actually commissioned as Marines every year, Borgschulte himself included. So maybe it underscores this push for evolving joint leadership, developing the force differently.
Exactly. It seems to point towards that integration becoming much more central.
Okay, so this brings us to the other side of the coin, the transition. Lieutenant General Borgschulte is replacing Navy Vice Admiral Yvette M. Now, she herself made history, right? Some really groundbreaking firsts. But her time there has been notably short.
That's right. Vice Admiral Davids was, in fact, the very first woman and the first Hispanic person to serve as superintendent, a huge milestone. She took the post in January 2024. But her tenure, at just 19 months, that's seen as significantly shorter than the norm.
How short is short? What's typical?
Well, federal statute generally intends for the superintendent to serve at least 3 years, and appointees usually retire after their term. Now, Davids did receive a waiver to continue serving. She's not retiring. But the 3-year mark is kind of the benchmark.
And her start wasn't exactly smooth either, was it?
Yeah.
I remember her nomination back in April 23 got held up for months.
That's right, 8 months. It was part of Senator Tommy Tuberville's broader legislative protest over certain Pentagon policies. So she only actually took command in January 2024.
And the fact that the Navy Secretary actually has to, formally explain to Congress why a superintendent leaves before hitting that 3-year mark, it just highlights how unusual this quick departure really is. So how much of this do you think is about her next assignment versus maybe being connected to this wider Navy turmoil we keep hearing about?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? On one hand, she's been nominated for a very senior, very crucial Pentagon role. Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Operations Plans, Strategy, and Warfighting Development. It's often just called N3, N5, N7 in Navy shorthand. Hugely important.
Okay, so covering current ops and future strategy.
Exactly. It's a massive portfolio. And Secretary Phelan praised her, lauded her strategic vision and operational depth, called her an exceptional asset. So clearly it's a significant promotion to a vital role. That's definitely part of the story.
So it's complex. An early departure for a leader who broke barriers, but also a move to a critical Pentagon job. It definitely raises questions about the dynamics at play behind the scenes.
Precisely. And this leadership shuffle, it isn't happening in isolation. David's leaving, Borgschulte coming in. It's part of what sources are calling a broader slate of military leadership nominations. It's also described as a larger Department of Defense or DoD leadership shakeup, all announced by the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth.
Right.
And the context provided is that this is happening amid Navy turmoil and represents a deliberate reshaping of the military's senior leader corps under Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
And it's not just Annapolis, is it? We're seeing apparently a growing trend of selecting Marine officers for posts traditionally held by sailors.
Yeah.
You mentioned the example of Marine Major General David Bly becoming the Navy's top lawyer, the Judge Advocate General.
That's another key example, yes. So it does seem to be part of a larger strategic pattern playing out across the Department of the Navy and maybe beyond.
So clearly this transition isn't in a vacuum. There are layers here. Strategy, personnel moves.
And to really grasp the full context, we also need to impartially touch upon some of the more controversial episodes that occurred during Vice Admiral David's time as superintendent. These events happened under what Secretary Hegseth has described as his campaign to inject political reform into military institutions.
Okay, what kind of episodes are we talking about?
Well, one prominent incident involved the removal and review of about 400 books from the Academy Library. Reports indicated they were primarily by Black authors or dealt with historical subjects like slavery or racism.
400 books, wow. Were they put back?
Most were later returned, according to reports. An example often cited was Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. Other reported incidents included some canceled speeches, and apparently the temporary removal of some historic photos, pictures of female Jewish graduates during a visit by Secretary Hegseth. There were also reports about the cancellation of several classes dealing with gender and sexuality studies and the rather abrupt cancellation of a foreign affairs conference planned on campus. These were attributed at the time to directives from the Trump administration.
That's quite a list of incidents for a relatively short tenure. It suggests a period of significant, maybe turbulent internal discussion at the Academy.
It certainly seems that way.
And yet, despite those public controversies, it's also important to note what some others were saying. We saw comments from parents, community members, expressing that Vice Admiral Davids would be sorely missed, calling her an absolutely fantastic leader.
Yes, those perspectives are definitely out there too, which isn't surprising. Leadership transitions often evoke mixed reactions.
Sure. And there's obviously been a lot of public discussion, maybe speculation is the right word, among observers about the timing, the context, why now? But if we can set aside the immediate controversies for a moment, what is the fundamental, the enduring purpose of the Naval Academy? And how does a leadership change like this ultimately affect that core mission?
That really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? The superintendent's role is just critical. They're the commanding officer, yes, but it's analogous to a civilian university president in many ways. They oversee the civilian academic dean who handles the curriculum and faculty. They also oversee the commandant of midshipmen who's responsible for all the professional and military training.
So academics and military training.
Both. Plus, they sit on the academic board that sets the USNA's academic standards. They really shape the entire midshipman experience, social, cultural, academic. It's a huge, comprehensive leadership role.
It's a role tied to a mission statement that goes way back, 1845, was it?
That's right.
The mission, to develop midshipmen morally, mentally, and physically, and to imbue them with the highest ideals of duty, honor, and loyalty, in order to graduate leaders who are dedicated to a career of naval service and have potential for future development in mind and character, to assume the highest responsibilities of command, citizenship, and government. That's pretty foundational.
It absolutely is. And that mission is kind of crystallized in their Strategic Plan 2030 vision statement, too, which is the premier leadership and educational institution for developing naval officers who will preserve peace and prevail in conflict, all guided, of course, by those core values: honor, courage, and commitment.
Okay, so You take that foundational mission, that vision, and you put a combat-tested Marine like Lieutenant General Borgschulte, call sign meet, with his background leading in places like Marja.
Yeah.
You put him in that top role. What's the actual practical impact likely to be for the midshipmen coming through now? For the kind of officers Annapolis produces, how might this shape their careers?
Well, the expectation, widely discussed, is that his appointment, given that deep combat background as Marine, will likely sharpen the focus on, quote, military readiness against emerging threats, and on preparing officers specifically for an increasingly contested world. It's less about theory, perhaps, and more about instilling maybe a more expeditionary mindset.
More emphasis on joint operations, perhaps, from day one.
That seems very likely, especially thinking about how Navy and Marine forces will need to operate seamlessly together. And remember, with roughly a quarter of the graduates already becoming Marine officers, his leadership could have a very direct, tangible impact on how future Navy and Marine Corps officers train together, how they understand each other's roles right from the start.
So real changes to curriculum or training focus wouldn't be surprising.
No, not at all. There's already, considerable discussion and maybe some speculation within the academy community itself about how instruction might shift, what the new points of emphasis might be. People often draw parallels to how new superintendents have sometimes refocused priorities at West Point or the Air Force Academy when they arrive. It's a natural point of discussion.
Okay, so this whole deep dive into the Naval Academy's leadership change, it really reveals this complex interplay, doesn't it, between centuries-old tradition, these forward-looking strategic shifts, and just the constant need for adaptation. You've heard about the historic the first Marine superintendent,
Yes.
the unusually brief tenure of the outgoing leader, Vice Admiral Davids, and the much broader context of these military leadership reforms happening right now.
And if we try to connect all these threads to the really big picture, as the global landscape keeps shifting, becoming more complex, more unpredictable, and as our military gears up more and more for true multi-domain warfare across land, sea, air, space, cyber, everything together, this transition at Annapolis, it raises a fundamental question, I think, for all of us to consider. How will that delicate balance between holding on to revered, important tradition and embracing the, frankly, urgent need for constant evolution? How will that balance shape the actual leaders, the ones who be tasked with preserving peace and, if necessary, prevailing in conflict in the decades ahead?
It's a crucial question. And understanding these kinds of profound shifts, well, it's absolutely key to being truly well-informed.